while they talked about documents, about schedules, about what... Her time is up. I'm sorry. That's what the on-call doctor said, his voice cold as he turned off some machines around the bed. On the other side of the glass, the in-laws exchanged relieved glances. The mistress, in a red dress, put her hand to her chest and smiled as if thanking God for an unexpected blessing. The husband breathed deeply, not from pain, but from liberation. No one cried. No one asked anything more. For them, that pregnant woman had fulfilled her role and was now officially out of the way. What none of them knew was that, lying there, motionless, with her eyes closed and her body weak, she heard everything. Every stifled laugh, every cruel comment, every shamelessly whispered "thank God." Trapped in a silent coma, she felt her heart race as she understood, perhaps too late, who those people really were. Before we delve into this amazing story, tell me which city and state you're watching from. Leave a comment and I'll reply with gratitude. And while you're at it, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and like this video. We want to share more stories like this. The hospital corridor was too bright for a moment that felt so heavy. The white lights reflected off the waxed floor, creating a cold glow that contrasted with the tightness in her chest. The smell of antiseptic mingled with the distant sounds of hurried footsteps, muffled voices, and beeping machines. She was being pushed quickly onto the stretcher, her body feeling heavy and tired, as if each breath required an effort she wasn't sure she could sustain. The pain came in waves, strong and deep, but what frightened her most wasn't the physical pain. It was the feeling that something was wrong, different from what it should be. She tried to speak, tried to ask about the baby, tried to catch her husband's eye, but the words wouldn't come out. Only a low groan escaped her lips before everything started to become blurry. She vaguely remembered seeing her husband standing in the hallway, his face tense, but not exactly worried. There was something distant in his gaze, as if he were there only out of obligation. Nearby, his mother spoke in a low voice to his father, exchanging quick, almost impatient glances. There were no holding hands, no words of comfort. That hurt more than any contraction. Amidst the confusion, she was taken to the delivery room, surrounded by doctors and nurses speaking technical terms, too fast for her to understand. The world seemed to spin, and the last thing she clearly remembered was thinking that she needed to stay awake. She needed to hear the baby cry. Then came the blackout. Not absolute silence, but something strange, as if she had been pushed into a dark place where distant sounds still echoed. When she opened her eyes, or at least thought she did, she realized she couldn't move. Her body wouldn't respond. Her arms, her legs, her mouth. Nothing. But her mind was awake. Every sound came muffled, as if from underwater. The constant beeping of a heart monitor echoed too close, marking a rhythm she tried to mentally follow to avoid panicking. It was then that she heard a doctor's voice, cold and hurried, saying something about complications, about excessive blood loss, about there no longer being an adequate response. The next sentence fell upon her like a judgment, even though she couldn't react. Her time is up. She wanted to scream. She wanted to say that she was there, that she could still hear, that she could still feel. But her body remained motionless, betraying her in the cruelest way possible. The on-call doctor continued talking, explaining something to the family members, while switching off some equipment with mechanical, almost automatic movements. To an outside observer, it truly seemed like the end. For her, it was the beginning of a conscious nightmare. Shortly after, the movement around her subsided. The room became quieter, but not empty. She noticed the door open and familiar voices enter. She immediately recognized her mother-in-law's voice. There was no crying. There was relief, a poorly disguised relief that made her heart race within her still chest. Her mother-in-law commented that this was inevitable, that the birth had been risky from the start, and that perhaps this was for the best of everyone. Each word hurt more than any physical pain. Her father-in-law agreed, murmuring something about moving on and thinking about the family. Neither of them mentioned the baby. Neither of them asked if there was anything that could be done. The husband entered soon after. She recognized the sound of his footsteps and, for a moment, foolishly hoped to hear a sob, an apology, any sign of regret. But what she heard was a long, heavy sigh, not of pain, but of restrained relief. He thanked the doctor briefly, almost formally, as if closing an uncomfortable subject. He said he would take care of everything that was necessary. That confirmed something she had always feared, but never wanted to admit. He was already prepared for that loss, perhaps even waiting for it. The next presence was even more painful. The mistress entered the room without any embarrassment, as if that space also belonged to her. The sound of her heels echoed across the floor, firm, confident. She spoke to her mother-in-law in a low tone, but loud enough for each word to reach the attentive ears of the woman motionless in bed. She said she was very sorry, but there was something in her voice that didn't match mourning. There was satisfaction. She commented that now things could finally work out, that difficult chapter had been closed. Then she uttered a phrase that stuck like an open wound. At least we won't have to pretend anymore. Inside that motionless body, the woman felt tears welling up, even without knowing if they were actually streaming down her face. Each word she heard tore at the image she still tried to preserve of that family. She remembered all the times she felt displaced, diminished, treated as someone temporary. She remembered the silent arguments, the sideways glances, the absences justified by work. Everything made sense now, in a cruel and definitive way, and she was there, alive, listening to every truth that would never have been spoken if she could have responded. The on-call doctor spoke again, saying that the body would be sent, that standard procedures would be followed. The word body echoed absurdly in her mind. Body? She could still feel her heart beating. She could still feel the air going in and out with difficulty. She was still there, but for everyone in that room, she had already ceased to be someone. She was just a problem solved, an obstacle removed. And the most painful thing, no one seemed to care to question that information. People would tell her she was internally struggling not to lose herself. She tried to focus on something that would keep her anchored to life. She thought about the baby. She thought about the future she had imagined. She thought about the name she had chosen, the clothes folded at home, the simple plans that now seemed so distant. Each memory was an anchor, preventing her from succumbing to complete despair. It was at that moment that she heard different footsteps, faster, more decisive. A male voice she didn't recognize asked what had happened. The tone was serious, attentive. Someone explained quickly, repeating the version of death. There was a pause, too short for someone who accepts such news without questioning. The new voice approached the bed. She felt a hand touch her wrist, firm, careful. Then, another hand lightly held her chin, as if someone were checking something that shouldn't be there if she had truly died. She wanted to grasp that hand. She wanted to show that she was alive, but she remained motionless. Still, she sensed the change in the air. The silence was different, less resigned, more attentive, that someone didn't seem convinced. And, although she didn't yet know it, that small instant marked the first crack in the lie that had been accepted so easily. What had begun as a definitive sentence was about to be questioned, and within that motionless body, hope, fragile, almost invisible, began to resist. The man who had just entered the room didn't immediately move away from the bed. Unlike the on-call doctor, his movements were too cautious for someone who believed he was facing a lifeless body. He observed the monitors, checked numbers, adjusted sensors. The rhythmic sound of the heart monitor continued, insistent, stubborn. He frowned, moved closer, and asked for silence with a firm gesture of his hand. His mother-in-law tried to explain again that the other doctor had already confirmed the death, but he didn't respond. He simply placed the stethoscope carefully, closed his eyes for a few seconds, and took a deep breath. That pause seemed endless to everyone in the room, and for her, trapped inside her own body, it was like the first glimmer of light after a long plunge into darkness. He leaned in slowly, bringing his face close to hers, and spoke in a low voice, almost a whisper, as if he didn't want to frighten her. He said he needed her to stay there, not to give up. Even without being able to react, something inside her responded. Her heart raced, and the monitor betrayed the change with a faster sound. The doctor looked up immediately. "She's alive," he said firmly. The impact of the sentence was immediate. The mother-in-law took a step back. The husband's eyes widened. The mistress stood motionless, as if the ground had disappeared beneath her feet. The silence that followed was heavy, awkward, full of disbelief. The doctor continued, explaining that there were clear signs of activity, that her condition indicated a deep coma, not death. He said that the delivery was not over and that something still needed to be done urgently. The on-call doctor's expression changed, first to confusion, then to nervousness. He tried to argue, to justify himself, but was interrupted. Authority in that room had changed hands. The woman felt a mixture of relief and fear. She was alive, but everything was still uncertain. The babies, although she didn't yet consciously know it, were still connected to her in some way. She was hastily prepared for new procedures. While the team organized themselves, family members were asked to leave. Their reaction was revealing. There were no tears of relief. There were no hugs. There was tension. The mother-in-law murmured something about confusion and unnecessary problems. The husband remained silent, his face rigid, as if trying to quickly calculate what this upheaval would mean for his life. The mistress avoided looking anyone in the eye, clutching her purse tightly, as if she wanted to disappear. And she, lying there, heard everything, feeling for the first time not only pain, but a terrifying clarity. During the procedure, her mind wandered between fragmented sounds, voices, and sensations. The doctor spoke to the team, asking for calm, precision, focus. At a specific moment, he leaned in again and whispered something that pierced the silence like a gentle yet profound shock. "There are two." The phrase took a few seconds to fully make sense in her mind, but when it did, something changed. Two. Twins, two lives that endured alongside her. The emotion came strong, silent, trapped inside a body that still couldn't react. If she could cry, she would cry. If she could smile, she would smile. That information, held within that whisper, became her ultimate anchor. Hours later, the procedure was completed. She remained in a coma, but now in a monitored, stable state, surrounded by attentive professionals. The babies had been taken for special care, alive, breathing, fighting. The doctor in charge explained everything clearly, away from the curious ears of the family. He said that the initial error had been serious, that the assessment had been premature, that measures would be taken. But the most important thing at that moment was that she was there, alive, and that her children were too. Outside, the news fell like a weight impossible to disguise. The mother-in-law, who had previously spoken of moving on, was now preoccupied with explanations. The father-in-law avoided eye contact with anyone. The husband tried to appear shaken, but his reaction was unconvincing. The mistress finally left in silence, without goodbyes, without smiles, without space. That silent celebration had transformed into absolute embarrassment. The hospital, which minutes before had seemed a stage of liberation for some, was now the scene of consequences. In the days that followed, she remained in a coma, but her mind remained alert. She heard doctors commenting on her recovery, on the necessary care, on the rare fact that someone in a coma could register so much information. She also heard visits, some sincere, others clearly motivated by fear of judgment. Each word reinforced something within her. When she awoke, nothing would be the same, and for the first time, this did not frighten her. The idea of returning to her old life, full of silences and humiliations, no longer seemed like an option. When she finally opened her eyes, days later, the world seemed different, clearer, slower. The first face she saw was that of the doctor who had questioned everything. He smiled gently and said she had been incredibly strong. He spoke of the twins, how well they were, how much she had endured. Tears came, now free, unconfined. She asked to see them. When they placed the two small bodies on her chest, something reorganized itself within her. There was no more doubt. There was no more fear. There was purpose. The husband tried to approach her afterward. He brought flowers, rehearsed words, an apology that sounded hollow. She listened in silence and, her voice still weak, said only that she needed time, but that some truths could no longer be ignored. He left the room smaller than when he entered. The mother-in-law appeared later with a different speech, sweeter, more cautious. She didn't respond. She didn't need to. Silence now was on her side. Months later, as she left the hospital with the twins in her arms, she was no longer the same woman who had entered that delivery room. There was pain in the past, but also clarity. The faked death had revealed everything that needed to be revealed. The masks fell when they believed she couldn't hear, and ironically, it was in the silence of the coma that she finally heard the whole truth. That story wasn't remembered as the day a wife died in childbirth. It was remembered as the day everyone was wrong about her, because while they celebrated her absence, she was there, alive, listening, resisting, and giving birth not only to two children, but to a new version of herself. A version that would never accept anything less than respect. And if this story touched your heart, don't keep it to yourself. Share this video with someone you love. Click now to share it. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss any of the upcoming stories we're preparing with great care for you.